The final day of the exercise began with an unprecedented event in Galactic Federation military history. Surrender. Gorthak, the last surviving member of Alpha Team, emerged from his hiding place at dawn with his weapons powered down and his hands raised in the universal gesture of capitulation. The massive Krithari warrior, whose species had never retreated in 3 centuries of recorded warfare, stood in the open and waited for death or capture. Through her scope, Sophia observed his surrender with professional interest. Gorthak's 4 cybernetic eyes were scanning the surrounding peaks, searching for any sign of the sniper who had eliminated his entire team. His posture conveyed defeat, exhaustion, and something that might have been respect. She made a decision that surprised everyone monitoring the exercise. She didn't shoot. Instead, Sophia activated her communication system for the first time since the exercise began. Her voice carried clearly across the encrypted channels that all teams monitored. "Gorthak of Alpha Team," she said calmly, "you have fought with honor. Withdraw to the extraction zone and await pickup. You will not be engaged during your movement." The silence that followed was profound. In 68 hours of systematic elimination, the human sniper had spoken only once, to offer mercy to a defeated enemy. Gorthak's massive frame seemed to slump with relief. "Understood, human sniper. I acknowledge your superior skill." His words carried across every communication channel, heard by the 2 remaining alien survivors and every instructor monitoring the exercise. It was the first time in recorded history that a Krithari warrior had publicly acknowledged defeat by a member of another species. Sophia, the sole survivor of Beta Team, listened to this exchange from her hiding place deep within a mountain crevice. The Vorthak commander had spent the night in a state approaching despair, watching her entire unit disappear one by one to an enemy she could neither see nor strike back against. The human's offer of mercy to Gorthak changed something fundamental in her thinking. This wasn't just a demonstration of superior firepower or advanced technology. It was a lesson in the complete spectrum of warfare, including the wisdom to know when killing was unnecessary. "Human snipers," Sophia transmitted, her voice carrying the exhaustion of someone who had pushed beyond physical and psychological limits. "Beta Team also requests terms of surrender." Sophia's response came immediately. "Granted. Proceed to extraction zone via the Northern Ridge route. Safe passage guaranteed. 2 down, 1 to go." Zikith commanded the 3 remaining members of Gamma Team, but his leadership meant little when his warriors were scattered across the mountain range and afraid to move. The Zephyrian unit leader had watched his reconnaissance force reduced from 8 elite scouts to 3 terrified individuals, hiding in whatever concealment they could find. Unlike the other team leaders, Zikith was not ready to surrender. "All Gamma units," he chittered into his communication system. "The human offers mercy to those who quit. We are Zephyrian warriors. We do not quit." The response from his scattered team was less than enthusiastic. "Sir," came a nervous transmission from Klikta. "We have been hiding for 2 days. We cannot see the enemy, cannot strike back, cannot even confirm her position. What tactical purpose does continued resistance serve?" "Honor," Zikth replied grimly.
"Zephyrian honor demands that we complete our mission or die in the attempt." From her elevated position, Sophia listened to this exchange with growing respect for the Zephyrian commander.
Zikth was outmatched and he knew it, but he was unwilling to abandon his duty. It was exactly the kind of stubborn courage that had made certain species legends throughout the galaxy. It was also the kind of determination that would get his remaining team members killed. "Zikth of Gamma Team," Sophia transmitted, "your courage is acknowledged. However, your tactical situation is hopeless. I have range and firing solutions for all 3 of your remaining positions. Surrender now, and your warriors live to fight another day." "Human sniper," Zikth replied, his compound eyes scanning the peaks above his position. "Zephyrians do not surrender while mission objectives remain achievable. Your mission objective was to eliminate me within 72 hours, Sophia pointed out. You have 6 hours remaining and no method of closing to engagement range. How do you consider this achievable?" There was a long pause before Zikth responded. When he did, his words carried the weight of someone who had accepted his fate. "Perhaps it is not achievable, but Zephyrian honor requires the attempt." Sophia found herself genuinely impressed by the alien commander's resolve. In different circumstances, she thought, Zikth would have made an excellent addition to any human military unit. His combination of tactical thinking and personal courage was exactly what elite forces valued most. Unfortunately, honor and courage were not sufficient to overcome the mathematical realities of extreme-range ballistics. Final offer, Sophia transmitted. Order your warriors to surrender. You may attempt to complete your mission alone if honor demands it. This time, Zikth's pause was even longer. When he finally responded, his voice carried a mixture of resignation and determination. Kliktha Ventar, you are ordered to surrender and proceed to extraction. I will continue the mission. Sir, we cannot abandon you, Kliktha protested. You can and you will, Zikth commanded. This is not abandonment. This is tactical necessity. The human is correct. Your continued presence serves no purpose except to provide additional targets. The two remaining Zephyrians reluctantly acknowledged their orders and began moving toward the extraction zone. Within minutes, only Zikth remained in the field, alone against an enemy who had already demonstrated the ability to eliminate targets at distances that defied conventional military doctrine. Sophia tracked his movement through her scope as he began a methodical advance toward her general position. Zikth was being careful, using proper concealment techniques and maintaining unpredictable movement patterns. But he was also moving in the only direction that offered any chance of closing range, directly toward her. It was a suicide mission, and both of them knew it. The Zephyrian commander made it surprisingly far before Sophia acquired him as a target. His natural flight capabilities allowed him to traverse terrain that would have stopped most other species, and his compound eyes spotted several of her previous firing positions. But ultimately, physics and mathematics were unforgiving masters. At 2,191 meters, Zikth paused on a rocky ledge to survey the terrain ahead. Through her scope, Sophia could see him clearly, a small, determined figure continuing his advance despite hopeless odds. His compound eyes were scanning the peaks above, still searching for any sign of the sniper who had eliminated his entire unit. She had a perfect shot. Range was well within her capabilities. Environmental conditions were favorable and the target was stationary. One squeeze of the trigger would end the exercise with complete victory for human forces. Instead, Sophia made a decision that would be discussed in military academies across the galaxy for generations to come. She stood up. For the first time in 71 hours, the human sniper revealed her position. She rose from her concealed hide site on the highest peak in the exercise zone, the MRAD clearly visible in her hands. At this distance, she appeared as a tiny figure against the sky, but her location was now unmistakable. Zikth's compound eyes focused on her immediately. For several seconds, predator and prey stared at each other across nearly 3 kilometers of mountain terrain. Then Sophia did something even more unprecedented. She waved. The gesture was clearly visible through optical magnification. A simple acknowledgement of one warrior's respect for another. It said everything that needed to be said about courage, honor, and the price of military excellence. Zikth understood immediately. His own arm rose in response, returning the salute across the impossible distance. Then, with the dignity that defined his species, he activated his communication system one final time. Human sniper, he transmitted. I acknowledge your complete victory. Gamma Team surrenders. The exercise officially ended 17 minutes later, but its impact would resonate throughout the galaxy for decades. 24 elite warriors from 3 of the Federation's most formidable species had been systematically outmaneuvered by a single human using technology that predated faster-than-light travel. In the Academy's command center, Commander Thexla stared at tactical displays that would revolutionize military thinking across 1,000 worlds. The impossible had become routine. Primitive technology had proven superior to advanced systems, and human warfare had been revealed as something far more sophisticated than anyone had imagined. Update all combat manuals, he ordered quietly. Human forces are to be reclassified from support troops to elite specialists. Effective immediately. Lieutenant Vektar looked up from his displays with something approaching awe. What classification should we assign to this particular human, sir? Commander Thexla's cybernetic eye focused on the tiny figure descending from the mountain peaks, still carrying the primitive weapon that had redefined galactic military doctrine. Sophia Chen, he said slowly, will be classified as what she has proven herself to be. The Sniper Queen. The mockery had ended. The legend had begun. And somewhere in the mountains, a slight human woman with dark hair instead. The third day brought desperation and a fundamental shift in alien military thinking. Word of the exercise had spread throughout the academy, despite official attempts at secrecy. Instructors from every species were crowding into the command center, watching the impossible unfold on their tactical displays. The human recruit was not just surviving against overwhelming odds. She was systematically dismantling 3 of the galaxy's most elite military units. "Show me the long-range projection analysis," Commander Thexla ordered. The holographic display materialized, showing Sophia's estimated position, based on ballistic backtracking from all confirmed shots. The data points formed a rough triangle covering nearly 50 square kilometers of the highest mountain peaks. "She has been moving between multiple firing positions," reported Lieutenant Vectar. "Each location offers sight lines to different areas of the exercise zone. The positioning suggests advanced planning and detailed terrain analysis." Major Kethra studied the display with growing unease. "The elevation of these positions. Some of them are above the operational ceiling for most of our species. The atmospheric conditions alone should degrade shooting accuracy significantly. What the alien observers didn't understand was that humans had evolved at altitudes where many galactic species would struggle to function. Sophia's physiology was adapted for thin air and low oxygen levels, giving her advantages that no amount of technology could replicate for other species. "There is something else," Vectar continued nervously. "Analysis of the shooting intervals suggests she is not just eliminating targets randomly. The timing and sequence appear designed to maximize psychological impact on the surviving forces." Commander Thexla's cybernetic eye focused on the tactical timeline. Each shot had come at moments when the alien teams felt most secure, striking targets who thought they were safely concealed or protected. The pattern was methodical, almost artistic in its precision. "She is hunting them," he realized, "not just killing them, but teaching them that nowhere is safe." In the exercise zone, this lesson was being learned with brutal efficiency. Alpha Team's 2 remaining Crithari had made a desperate decision to abandon their cave shelter. 40 hours of confinement had depleted their supplies and shattered their morale. They needed to move, to find water and food regardless of the risks. Gorthak led the way, his cybernetic implants operating at minimum power to avoid detection. Every sensor sweep showed empty terrain, but both warriors knew that meant nothing. The human sniper had demonstrated the ability to strike from distances beyond their detection capabilities. They moved in short rushes between cover positions, never exposing themselves for more than a few seconds at a time. Standard counter-sniper tactics, executed with the precision that had made Crithari forces legendary throughout the galaxy. It didn't matter. Sophia had been tracking their movement for 3 hours, predicting their route based on terrain analysis and basic survival needs. There were only so many paths that could provide both concealment and access to water sources. The Crithari were being careful, but they were also being predictable. The shot came from 3,076 meters away, fired from a position the Crithari had checked and cleared hours earlier. Vorthek never heard the supersonic crack of the bullet's passage. One moment he was scanning for threats, the next moment Gorthak was alone. The surviving Crithari warrior stood motionless for several seconds, his 4 cybernetic eyes processing the impossible. His teammate had been eliminated by an enemy who wasn't there, using a weapon that shouldn't work at this range. Gorthak's training finally overcame his shock, and he immediately began evasive maneuvers. But as he moved, a terrible realization crept into his consciousness. He was the last member of Alpha Team. 3 of the galaxy's finest warriors had been eliminated by a single human using primitive technology. Beta Team was down to 2 survivors. Sothara and Yisrak had spent the night moving through underground cave systems, using their serpentine bodies to navigate spaces too confined for most species. They thought they had found safety in the depths, beyond the reach of any surface-based sniper. They were wrong. Sophia had been tracking their movement through the cave network using seismic sensors no larger than coins. The tiny devices detected vibrations caused by Vorthak movement, allowing her to predict where they would emerge. When Yisrak finally surfaced near a mountain spring, Sophia was ready. The 2,934-meter shot arrived with the finality of an avalanche. Yisrak simply vanished, leaving Sophia alone with the knowledge that even underground movement offered no protection from the human sniper's reach. Gamma Team had been reduced to 4 survivors, but their situation was arguably the most desperate. Zicht had lost all semblance of unit cohesion. With his remaining Zephyrians scattered across dozens of square kilometers, they communicated in brief, coded transmissions, afraid that longer signals might somehow reveal their positions. Tikra, reporting minimal movement in Sector 12, came a nervous chittering over their encrypted channel. Maintain observation protocols. Zicht responded, do not engage, do not expose, do not pursue. The once proud reconnaissance unit had been reduced to hiding and hoping. Their natural advantages, speed, flight capability, enhanced vision, had proven useless against an enemy who struck from beyond their sensory range. But Sophia was far from finished with her demonstration. She had saved her most challenging shot for this moment, when alien morale was at its lowest and their tactical thinking was most disrupted. Tikra was positioned on a rocky outcrop 247 meters away, partially concealed behind natural stone formations. The target was small, the range was extreme, and wind conditions were variable. Most significantly, this would be her longest confirmed shot of the exercise. If successful, it would exceed the maximum range that Galactic Federation military doctrine considered possible for chemical projectile weapons. Sophia spent 2 hours preparing for the engagement. Every environmental factor was measured and calculated multiple times. Wind speed, air pressure, temperature gradients, even the rotation of the planet beneath her position, all variables that could affect bullet trajectory over such an enormous distance. The MRAD was adjusted to its finest settings. The scope was calibrated for maximum magnification. The specialized ammunition had been selected for optimal performance under current conditions. Every component of the weapon system was operating at peak efficiency. Through her scope, Tikra appeared as a tiny figure barely distinguishable from the surrounding rocks. At this magnification, even minor movements were amplified dramatically. Sophia had to time her shot perfectly, accounting not just for current target position but for where the Zephyrian would be during the bullet's flight time. The calculation was staggering in its complexity. Flight time 4.2 seconds. Target movement during flight approximately 8.3 meters. Wind deflection 1.7 meters. Gravitational drop 31.4 meters. Atmospheric density variations. Multiple corrections required. Any human using standard calculation methods would have needed hours to work through the mathematics. Sophia did it in minutes, her mind processing variables with an intuitive understanding that came from years of training and natural talent. The crosshairs settled on empty air, 1.7 meters to the left and 31.4 meters above Tikra's current position. To any observer, it would have looked like she was aiming at nothing. But Sophia wasn't shooting at where the target was. She was shooting at where space and time would intersect 4.2 seconds in the future. Her finger found the trigger. The MRAD fired with its familiar thunder, sending another depleted neutronium bullet on its impossible journey across the mountains. 2 seconds later, Tikra was gone. The shot was so perfect, so precise, that even Zicht's compound eyes couldn't initially process what had happened. His teammate had simply vanished, struck by a projectile that had seemed to come from the sky itself. The remaining alien forces, 3 survivors from 24 elite warriors, finally understood what they were facing. This wasn't just superior marksmanship or advanced technology. This was a demonstration of human warfare at its most refined level, where mathematics and instinct combined to create effects that seemed supernatural. In the Academy's command center, absolute silence had fallen. Every instructor, every tactical analyst, every military expert from across the galaxy was staring at displays that showed the impossible had become routine. Confirmed kill at 3,247 meters, Lieutenant Vector reported in a whisper. Single-shot chemical projectile manual targeting. Commander Thexla's cybernetic eye dimmed as it processed the implications. Update our databases, he ordered quietly. Human warfare capabilities have been significantly underestimated. 22 hours remained in the exercise. 3 alien survivors were still hiding somewhere in the mountains, their elite status reduced to desperate hope for survival. And Sophia Chen, the sniper queen, was preparing to teach the galaxy one final lesson about the effectiveness of human military doctrine. By the second day, panic had replaced confidence among the surviving alien forces. The Academy's command center buzzed with activity as instructors monitored the exercise through orbital surveillance systems. What they saw defied every tactical manual in the Galactic Federation database. 3 elite teams, composed of species considered among the galaxy's finest warriors, were being systematically eliminated by a single human using what appeared to be ancient technology. Commander Thexila studied the tactical displays with growing concern. His cybernetic eye whirred as it processed data streams from multiple sources. "Show me the ballistic analysis again," he ordered his technical staff. The holographic display materialized above the command table, showing the trajectory data from each confirmed kill. Red lines traced impossible arcs across the mountainous terrain, connecting impact points to calculated firing positions. Shot 1, 2,147 meters, 12.3-degree elevation angle, reported Lieutenant Vektar, a junior Vorthak officer. Shot 2, 3,124 meters, 31.7-degree elevation angle. Shot 3, 2,956 meters, 18.9-degree elevation angle. Commander Thexla's scaled features twisted into a frown. These ranges exceed the specifications for human weapons in our database. Are we certain the ballistic calculations are correct? Confirmed through multiple sensor arrays, Vektar replied. The projectile velocities are consistent with chemical propulsion, but the accuracy at these ranges should be impossible without advanced guidance systems. None of our sensors detect any electronic signatures that would indicate guided munitions. What truly disturbed the command staff was the precision of each shot. Single-shot kills at extreme range required not just advanced equipment, but extraordinary skill. The calculations involved were mind-bogglingly complex, requiring real-time analysis of dozens of environmental variables. Perhaps the human is using some kind of artificial intelligence system, suggested Major Kethra, a Krathari tactical analyst. Hidden computation devices that our sensors cannot detect. Commander Thexla was not convinced. "Show me the thermal analysis of her position." The display shifted to infrared imaging from orbital platforms. A single heat signature appeared on the highest peak in the exercise zone, so small and faint that it barely registered on their sensors. The signature had remained in the same general area for over 30 hours, moving only occasionally and never more than a few hundred meters. She is not using advanced technology, Thexila realized. Look at the heat pattern. No electronic emissions, no power sources, no energy weapon signatures. She is doing this manually. The implications were staggering. Manual calculations for ballistic trajectories at these ranges required mathematical skills that most species considered beyond biological capability. Even with computer assistance, shots like these pushed the boundaries of what was physically possible. How is this human achieving such precision? Major Kethra asked. Commander Thexla had fought alongside human forces during the frontier wars. He had seen their soldiers in action and developed a grudging respect for their capabilities. But even his experience had not prepared him for this demonstration of skill. Humans, he said slowly, have spent their entire evolutionary history as persistence hunters. They developed the ability to track prey across vast distances, calculating movement patterns and environmental factors without technological assistance. Perhaps we have underestimated how effectively they can apply these instincts to modern warfare. Meanwhile, in the exercise zone, the surviving alien forces were learning hard lessons about human warfare. Alpha Team's 2 remaining Krathari had spent 18 hours hiding in their cave, afraid to move during daylight hours. Their cybernetic implants were powered down to minimum levels, creating an electronic silence that felt alien to warriors accustomed to constant data streams. Without their technological advantages, they felt blind and vulnerable. Gorthak whispered to his teammate, his voice barely audible even in the confined space. "Vorthak, we cannot remain here indefinitely. Our supplies will not last another day, and the human knows we are somewhere in this area." Vorthak's 4 cybernetic eyes glowed dimly in the cave's darkness. "Every time we move, she eliminates one of us. How can she see us from such distances? How can she calculate shots that our computers say are impossible?" Neither Krathari had an answer. Their training had prepared them for conventional warfare against enemies using familiar technologies. Fighting an opponent who operated outside established parameters was like trying to solve equations with missing variables. Beta Team was having similar struggles. Sophia led her 3 surviving teammates through a nightmare of constant movement, never staying in one location for more than 20 minutes. Their natural stealth capabilities were being pushed to absolute limits as they tried to remain invisible to an enemy who seemed capable of striking from anywhere. The human is not hunting randomly, Sophia hissed to her team during a brief rest in a rocky crevice. She is forcing us to move in predictable patterns. Each shot drives us toward terrain that favors her next engagement. Israk, the team's youngest member, coiled nervously among the rocks. How do we fight an enemy we cannot see? Our heat sensors detect nothing at the ranges she is shooting from. We adapt, Sophia replied grimly. Human warfare emphasizes patience and persistence. If she wants to play a waiting game, we will deny her the targets she seeks. But adaptation was easier said than accomplished. Every tactical doctrine in their training assumed that enemies would engage at reasonable ranges using detectable weapons. The idea of facing an opponent who could strike accurately from distances beyond sensor range had never been seriously considered. Gamma Team was in the worst position of all. Zikth's 6 remaining Zephyrians were scattered across the mountain range, afraid to regroup, but equally afraid to remain isolated. Their natural flight capabilities, which should have been a tremendous advantage, had become a liability. Moving through open air made them visible to the sniper's optics, while staying grounded limited their mobility. Nikth reporting, came a nervous chittering over their communication system. No movement detected in Sector 7. Request permission to relocate to higher ground. Negative, Zikth replied immediately. Maintain current position and observe only. Do not expose yourself to potential sightlines. But the truth was that Zikth had no idea which sightlines were dangerous. The human sniper seemed capable of shooting from elevations that defied logical analysis. Her firing positions were beyond the range of their reconnaissance equipment, hidden among peaks that looked identical to dozens of others. High above them all, Sophia continued her methodical work. She had moved twice during the night, relocating to different firing positions to maintain unpredictability. Each new hide site had been selected days earlier during her initial reconnaissance, chosen for optimal sightlines and concealment characteristics. The alien teams assumed she was operating from a single location, but in reality, she was using the entire mountain range as her hunting ground. The MRAD had performed flawlessly through dozens of shots. Its mechanical precision never wavered, and the depleted neutronium ammunition maintained consistent ballistic characteristics across varying environmental conditions. But the real advantage was not the weapon itself, it was the centuries of human experience that guided its use. Sophia's training had included detailed study of historical sniper operations dating back to Earth's ancient conflicts. She understood the psychological impact of invisible death, the way uncertainty and fear could paralyze even elite forces. Each shot was calculated not just for physical effect, but for maximum psychological disruption. The alien teams were no longer hunting her. They were hiding from her, reacting to her initiative rather than executing their own tactical plans. This transformation from predator to prey was exactly what she had intended to achieve. Through her scope, she observed Beta Team's latest movement. Sophia was leading her surviving teammates along a ridgeline that would bring them within 2,700 meters of her current position. The Vorthak were being careful, using proper cover and maintaining irregular spacing, but they were also following a route that Sophia had anticipated. She made careful adjustments to her firing solution. Wind speed had increased slightly, and the air temperature was dropping as afternoon shadows lengthened across the mountains. Each variable required precise calculation to ensure the bullet would arrive exactly where she intended. The crosshairs settled on Rethsa, Beta Team's demolition specialist. Unlike her previous shots, this engagement would be more challenging. The target was moving at an angle that required complex lead calculations, and the wind conditions were shifting unpredictably. Sophia controlled her breathing and let her training take over. Mathematics became instinct, physics became intuition. The MRAD's trigger broke cleanly, sending another depleted neutronium bullet on its deadly arc across the mountains. 10 seconds later, Rethsa simply ceased to exist. The remaining Vorthak immediately scattered, abandoning their formation for the desperate safety of individual evasion. Sisatara's heat sensors detected nothing that could explain where the shot had originated, But the message was clear. Nowhere was safe from the human sniper's reach. 6 targets remained. 54 hours left in the exercise, and the second shot came 6 hours later, when Beta Team thought they had found safety. Sophia had led her 5 remaining teammates up a steep mountain face to reach what appeared to be an impregnable position. The Vorthak were coiled among massive boulders on a narrow ledge, with sheer cliff faces above and below them. Their heat-sensing organs had detected no thermal signatures in their vicinity, and their position offered commanding views of 3 separate valleys. It was exactly the kind of defensive position that Galactic Federation doctrine recommended when facing an unknown sniper threat. High ground, good visibility, multiple escape routes, natural protection from incoming fire. By conventional military standards, they should have been completely secure. Sophia's mistake was assuming that conventional standards applied to Sophia's weapon. The depleted neutronium bullet struck Sophia, Beta Team's communications specialist, from a distance of 3,124 meters. The projectile had been fired from a position so elevated that it struck at a nearly vertical angle, coming down like a meteor from the sky above. The impact was so sudden and violent that the other Vorthak initially thought their teammate had been hit by some kind of orbital bombardment. Impossible, Sophia hissed, her serpentine body coiling in agitation. No ground-based weapon can achieve that trajectory angle at this range. But the evidence was undeniable. Sophia was gone, and the impact crater in the rock showed characteristics of a kinetic projectile traveling at extraordinary velocity. Worse, the angle of impact meant the shot had come from somewhere above them, a position that should have been impossible to reach or hold. Sophia's heat sensors swept the peaks above their position, looking for any thermal signature that might indicate a sniper's location. She found nothing. The human was either too far away to detect, or she was using some kind of thermal masking technology that Vorthak physiology couldn't penetrate. She is above us, Sophia reported to her remaining team members. Elevation unknown, distance unknown. Standard concealment protocols are ineffective. The surviving Vorthak began to move immediately, abandoning their supposedly secure position for the uncertainty of open ground. Their natural stealth capabilities would serve them better in motion than pinned down in a location the enemy sniper had already ranged. Meanwhile, Gamma Team was facing their own crisis of confidence. Zikith had spread his 8 Zephyrians across the eastern mountain range, using their natural flight capabilities to scout from multiple elevated positions. It was a textbook reconnaissance deployment that should have made them nearly impossible to eliminate. Systematically, the problem was that nearly impossible wasn't the same as actually impossible. Sophia had been tracking their movement patterns for hours, plotting their routes on her range cards with mechanical precision. The Zephyrians were fast and unpredictable individually, but their coordinated search pattern followed logical principles. They maintained communication distances, avoided certain types of terrain, and regrouped at regular intervals. Most importantly, they had to land occasionally to rest. Clicketh, one of Gamma Team's senior scouts, settled onto a rocky outcrop to examine some unusual markings in the stone. His compound eyes could detect details invisible to most species, and he had spotted what might have been human footprints on a trail far below. He never saw the shot that killed him. The bullet traveled 2,956 meters in 3.1 seconds, arriving with enough kinetic energy to shatter the rocky outcrop along with its target. The other Zephyrians heard the supersonic crack as the projectile passed through the air. But by the time they could react, Click had simply vanished into a cloud of pulverized stone. "Report! Report!" Zicht chittered frantically into his communication system. "Click, respond immediately." Silence answered him. When the dust settled, there was nothing left but a smoking crater and the lingering smell of vaporized rock. Zicht's compound eyes processed the scene with mechanical precision. The trajectory analysis was disturbing. Based on the impact angle and the projectile's power, the shot had originated from a position at least 3 kilometers away. That placed the sniper somewhere in the high peaks, possibly at elevations that would challenge even Zephyrian physiology. "All units, emergency protocols," Zicht ordered. "The enemy sniper is operating from extreme elevation. Range appears to exceed our weapon specifications by significant margins." What none of the alien teams understood was that they were facing a fundamental mismatch of military philosophy. Galactic Federation warfare relied on advanced technology, sophisticated sensors, and overwhelming firepower. Battles were fought at close to medium ranges using energy weapons that could slice through almost any defense. Human warfare had evolved differently. On Earth, the longest confirmed sniper kill was over 3,500 meters, achieved using technology that would have been considered primitive by galactic standards. Human snipers trained for patience, precision, and the ability to remain undetected for extended periods, while engaging targets at distances that challenged the limits of physics. Sophia represented the pinnacle of this tradition. She'd trained with Earth's most elite military units, mastering techniques that had been refined through centuries of conflict. Her weapon was primitive only in the sense that it relied on fundamental physical principles rather than exotic technologies. The MRAD fired solid projectiles using chemical propulsion, but every component had been engineered to tolerances that rivaled the most advanced Federation manufacturing. The scope used traditional optical principles, but its lenses were crafted from materials that could focus light with supernatural precision. The ammunition was chemically propelled, but each bullet was a masterpiece of ballistic engineering. More importantly, Sophia understood something that the alien teams had never considered. Sometimes, the oldest solutions were the most effective ones. Energy weapons generated heat signatures. Particle beams created electromagnetic emissions. Molecular disruptors required enormous power sources. All of these characteristics made advanced weapons detectable to sophisticated sensors, even at extreme ranges. The MRAD generated no electromagnetic signature. Its muzzle flash was brief and contained. Its acoustic signature was distinctive but difficult to locate precisely across mountainous terrain. For practical purposes, it was invisible to the sensor technologies that the alien teams carried. As the day progressed, both surviving teams began to understand the true scope of their problem. They weren't facing a primitive human with outdated equipment. They were confronting someone who had turned technological simplicity into an overwhelming tactical advantage. Alpha Team's 2 remaining Krathari had taken shelter in a deep cave, their cybernetic implants shut down to avoid generating detectable emissions. Beta Team's 4 surviving Vorthak were moving constantly, never remaining in one position long enough for a sniper to acquire them as targets. Gamma Team's 6 remaining Zephyrians had abandoned their search pattern entirely, focusing purely on evasion and survival. All 3 teams were now playing defense, trying to last until the exercise timer expired. But they had forgotten one crucial detail about the mission parameters. Sophia only had to survive for 72 hours. She didn't have to hide. From her position high in the mountains, she continued her patient observation. 7 targets remained. The range card showed optimal engagement opportunities for each team's likely movement routes. Weather conditions remained favorable for long-range shooting. She had 65 hours left to complete her work. More than enough time to demonstrate why humans had earned their place in the Galactic Federation through merit rather than biological superiority. The MRAD waited silently across its bipod, ready to deliver another lesson in the effectiveness of primitive technology, guided by human determination. Dawn came slowly to the mountains, painting the peaks in shades of gold and crimson. Sophia had been awake for 26 hours straight, but her eyes remained sharp and focused. Sleep was a luxury she couldn't afford while 3 hostile teams searched for her position. The MRAD lay perfectly still across its bipod, aimed at a specific point 2,147 meters away. Every calculation had been checked and rechecked. Wind speed 8.3 kilometers per hour from the northwest. Temperature -4 degrees Celsius. Air pressure 701 millibars. Humidity 23%. Each variable had been fed into her ballistic computer, an ancient human device no larger than her palm. Most alien species relied on cybernetic implants for complex calculations. The technology was faster and more accurate than biological brains could manage. But cybernetic systems generated electromagnetic signatures that could be detected by enemy sensors. Sophia's mechanical calculator was completely passive, invisible to any scanning technology. The galaxy had developed. Alpha Team appeared, exactly where her predictions said they would. Kazrath led his 3 teammates across the valley floor in textbook Krathari formation. Their cybernetic implants swept the terrain constantly, looking for any sign of human presence. The massive warriors moved with surprising grace for their size, using rocks and sparse vegetation to break up their silhouettes. Through her scope, Sophia could see details that should have been impossible at this range. Khazrath's 4 cybernetic eyes glowed with soft blue light as they processed visual data. His teammates carried advanced sensor packages that could detect heartbeats, breathing patterns, and even stress pheromones from considerable distances. What they couldn't detect was a single human lying motionless on a mountain peak nearly 3 kilometers away. Sophia controlled her breathing using techniques learned from Earth's most elite snipers. Slow inhalation through the nose, natural pause. Controlled exhalation through slightly parted lips. Her heart rate dropped to barely 50 beats per minute. Every muscle in her body relaxed except those needed to maintain perfect shooting position. The crosshairs settled on Khazrath's center mass. At this range, even a perfect shot would take nearly 4 seconds to reach the target. During that time, Khazrath would move approximately 12 meters at his current walking pace. Sophia had to aim not at where he was, but at where he would be when the bullet arrived. Her finger found the trigger. The MRAD's firing mechanism was purely mechanical. Springs, levers, and precisely machined steel components that had remained unchanged for centuries. No electronics to malfunction, no power sources to fail, no complex systems that could break down under extreme conditions. The moment came with mathematical precision. Khazrath reached the exact point where all her calculations converged. Wind conditions were optimal. Temperature was stable. His movement pattern was predictable. Sophia squeezed the trigger. The MRAD fired with a sound like thunder rolling across the mountains. The depleted neutronium bullet left the barrel at 1,200 meters per second, trailing a shockwave that disturbed the thin mountain air. At this velocity, the projectile carried enough kinetic energy to punch through standard body armor, cybernetic implants, and several centimeters of solid rock. Seconds later, Khazrath simply vanished. One moment he was walking across the valley floor, confident and alert. The next moment, there was only a small crater where he had been standing. His 3 teammates stopped instantly, their cybernetic systems struggling to process what had just happened. "Contact!" Gorthak shouted into his communication system. "Khazrath is down. Khazrath is down!" The remaining Krathari immediately took defensive positions, their forearms bringing multiple weapons to bear on potential threat vectors. But their sensors showed nothing. No muzzle flash, no heat signature, no electromagnetic emissions that would indicate an enemy position. "Where did the shot come from?" demanded Vorthek, the team's tactical specialist. Gorthak's cybernetic implants ran ballistic analysis on the impact crater. Based on the angle of impact and the crater pattern, the shot originated from an elevation approximately 800 meters above our position. Distance unknown. The projectile velocity was too high for standard Federation weapons. They began scanning the surrounding peaks with everything they had: thermal sensors, electromagnetic detectors, seismic monitors, even chemical sniffers that could detect human pheromones from kilometers away. But Sophia's position was beyond the effective range of their equipment, and her primitive technology generated no detectable signatures. 22 kilometers away, Beta Team heard the shot echoing across the mountains. Sophie's heat-sensing organs detected the brief thermal bloom from the MRAD's muzzle, but the distance was too great to determine precise coordinates. "That was not a Federation weapon," she hissed to her team. "The acoustic signature is wrong. Chemical propulsion, possibly human origin." Her teammates coiled nervously. Human weapons were considered primitive and ineffective, but the sound of that shot had carried enormous power. Whatever had made that noise was far more dangerous than their intelligence briefings had suggested. "The human is not hiding," Sophia realized. "She is hunting us." Gamma Team was spread across the eastern approaches when they detected the supersonic crack of the bullet passing overhead. Sixth's compound eyes could track the projectile's vapor trail for several hundred meters, but the shot's origin point was beyond even Zephyrian visual capabilities. "Impossible," Zicht chittered to his scattered team. "Human weapons cannot reach this range. Our intelligence data shows maximum effective distance of 1,000 meters for their best systems." But the evidence was undeniable. Khazrath was gone, eliminated by a single shot from a distance that exceeded the specifications of any weapon in their databases. Either human technology was far more advanced than anyone realized, Or this particular human was capable of things that defied galactic military doctrine. Sophia remained motionless in her hide position, watching through the scope as the alien team struggled to understand what had happened. Their confusion was understandable. The shot she had just made would have been challenging for Earth's most elite snipers using the finest equipment available. But she wasn't finished yet. Alpha Team was regrouping, their formation tighter now that they knew they were being hunted. Beta Team was changing course, moving toward higher ground where they thought they might be safer. Gamma Team was consolidating their scattered pairs, seeking strength in numbers. All three responses were tactically sound by conventional standards. They were also exactly what Sophia had hoped they would do. Predictable movement patterns made for easier target acquisition at extreme range. She began planning her second shot. The MRAD had been designed for sustained operations. Its barrel was constructed from materials that could handle hundreds of rounds without accuracy degradation. The action was so precisely machined that it could maintain consistent performance across vast temperature ranges and environmental conditions. More importantly, Sophia had brought 200 rounds of ammunition. Each bullet had been individually crafted and calibrated for specific engagement scenarios. She had rounds optimized for different ranges, different weather conditions, and different types of targets. The aliens had made one critical mistake in their assessment of human capabilities. They had assumed that primitive technology was ineffective technology. In reality, human weapons were primitive by choice, not by limitation. Sometimes, the simplest solutions were the most reliable ones. Mechanical systems didn't suffer from electromagnetic interference. Chemical propulsion didn't require complex power sources. Solid projectiles couldn't be jammed by electronic countermeasures. In an age of sophisticated warfare, the MRAD was actually the perfect weapon for this type of engagement. As the sun climbed higher into the alien sky, Sophia continued her patient observation. The remaining 9 targets were moving in patterns she could predict. Environmental conditions were stable and favorable for long-range shooting. She had 71 hours remaining in the exercise, 9 targets left to eliminate, and a rifle that could reach out and touch anything within 5 kilometers with absolute precision. The hunt was just beginning. The transport ships dropped their cargo in the pre-dawn darkness. 4 separate insertion zones scattered across the training mountains, each team landing kilometers apart. Sophia felt the familiar weight of her equipment as she stepped onto the rocky terrain. The MRAD rifle was slung across her back, its familiar bulk a comfort after months of training with standard Federation energy weapons. She was alone, exactly as she preferred it. The alien teams had spent the transport time bragging about their strategies. Alpha Team planned to use Krathari strength and cybernetic targeting to establish overlapping fields of fire. Beta Team intended to leverage Vorthak stealth and heat sensing to hunt targets in close quarters. Gamma Team would rely on Zephyrian speed and visual processing to spot enemies before they could react. All 3 teams assumed they were hunting Sophia. None of them had bothered to check the exercise parameters carefully. Sophia pulled out her tablet and reviewed the mission briefing one more time. The document was clear. Survive 72 hours while being hunted by 3 specialized teams. Secondary objective: eliminate any threats that posed an immediate danger to mission success. Most recruits interpreted this as a pure survival exercise. Hide, evade, wait for the timer to run out. Sophia saw something different in those words. She saw opportunity. The mountains stretched before her like a 3-dimensional puzzle. Peaks rose and fell in complex patterns, creating sightlines and dead zones that required careful analysis. Wind patterns shifted with altitude and time of day. Temperature differentials would affect ballistic performance. Everything mattered when you were planning shots at extreme range. She began climbing immediately, using natural rock formations and sparse vegetation for concealment. The alien teams would expect her to hide in valleys or caves, using terrain to break up their sensor sweeps. Instead, she was heading for the highest peaks, where the thin air and extreme elevation would give her advantages they couldn't match. 20 kilometers away, Alpha Team was establishing their first hunting position. Khazrath's cybernetic implants were already scanning the terrain, looking for heat signatures or movement patterns that might indicate human presence. His 3 teammates spread out in a standard Krathari formation, their forearms allowing them to operate multiple sensor systems simultaneously. Human thermal signature is weak, reported Gorthak, the team's sensor specialist. Their body temperature is lower than most species, and they generate minimal heat waste. We may need to rely on movement detection. No problem, Kazrath replied confidently. Humans are clumsy. They cannot move through terrain without leaving obvious traces. We will track her like wounded prey. In the opposite valley, Beta Team was having similar thoughts. Sisithara's heat-sensing organs were among the most sensitive in the galaxy, capable of detecting temperature variations as small as 1/10 of a degree. Her team slithered through the rocky terrain with perfect silence, their serpentine bodies adapted for moving across any surface without sound. The human will try to hide in caves or underground spaces, Sisithara hissed to her team. These mountains have many such places. We will check them systematically, driving her toward Alpha Team's position. Gamma Team was taking a different approach. Zikth had split his 8 Zephyrians into 4 pairs, creating a wide search net that could cover vast areas quickly. Their compound eyes could process multiple visual spectrums simultaneously, and their natural ability to fly short distances gave them excellent reconnaissance capabilities. Human technology is primitive, Zikth chittered to his team. Their camouflage systems are basic optical patterns, easily detected by advanced visual processing. We will spot her within the first 6 hours. None of the teams considered that Sophia might not be hiding. She had been climbing for 4 hours when she reached her first position. A rocky outcrop near the summit of Mount Keras provided excellent visibility across 3 valleys while offering concealment from below. The elevation was nearly 3,000 meters above sea level, and the air was thin enough that most species would struggle with oxygen deprivation. Sophia's human physiology handled the altitude better than expected. Her ancestors had evolved at high elevations, and her lungs were adapted for extracting oxygen from thin air. What would weaken alien physiology actually gave her an advantage. She unpacked the MRAD with practiced efficiency. The rifle was a masterpiece of human engineering, combining traditional ballistics with modern material science. The barrel was manufactured to tolerances measured in fractions of millimeters. The scope was a marvel of optical precision, capable of magnification levels that seemed impossible for its size, but the real magic was in the ammunition. Sophia had spent weeks working with the Academy's ballistics lab to develop specialized rounds for this exercise. The bullets were crafted from depleted neutronium, a material so dense that even tiny projectiles carried enormous kinetic energy. The powder charges were precisely measured chemical compositions that burned at exact temperatures and pressures. Each round was individually calibrated for specific environmental conditions. Temperature, humidity, air pressure, wind speed, target distance. Everything was calculated and compensated for during the manufacturing process. When fired under the right conditions, these bullets could maintain supersonic velocity and pinpoint accuracy across distances that defied belief. She assembled her shooting position with the same attention to detail. A small bipod provided stable support for the rifle. A meteorological station no bigger than her hand began collecting environmental data. Range cards were arranged within easy reach, each one containing ballistic calculations for different distances and conditions. Then she began hunting. The scope revealed a world invisible to naked eyes. Magnified 50 times, distant mountains appeared close enough to touch. Movement that would be impossible to spot at normal ranges became clearly visible. Heat signatures showed up as subtle color variations in the advanced optics. It took 20 minutes to spot Alpha Team. Kazrath and his Krathari were moving in formation across a ridgeline 4 kilometers away. Their cybernetic implants gleamed in the morning sunlight, and their standard tactical movement patterns made them easy to track. They were being careful, using proper cover and concealment techniques, but they were also being predictable. Sophia made careful notes about their position, direction of travel, and estimated time to various choke points. Alpha Team was moving toward a valley that would bring them within 2 kilometers of her position. If they maintained their current route, they would be vulnerable to engagement in approximately 6 hours. She continued scanning and found Beta Team 3 hours later. The Vorthak were harder to spot because of their natural stealth capabilities, but their heat signatures stood out clearly against the cold mountain rocks. They were moving in a serpentine pattern through the lower elevations, checking caves and rocky overhangs systematically. Gamma Team was the most challenging to locate. The Zephyrians moved quickly and used their limited flight capabilities to avoid predictable routes. But their compound eyes reflected light in distinctive ways, and their coordinated search pattern eventually gave them away. They were working the eastern approaches, moving in pairs across terrain that would bring them into potential engagement range by nightfall. All three teams were hunting her. None of them realized they had become prey. Sophia spent the rest of the day refining her calculations. Wind patterns shifted with the sun's movement. Temperature differentials changed as the day progressed. Air pressure variations affected ballistic performance in subtle but measurable ways. Every factor had to be accounted for if she wanted to make shots at maximum range. As the sun began to set, she made her first decision. Alpha Team would reach optimal positioning in the early morning hours. The range would be approximately 2,800 meters, well within the MRAD's capabilities, but beyond anything the aliens expected from human technology. She, prepared for a very long night of patience and preparation. Tomorrow the real hunt would begin. The Galactic Defense Academy buzzed with nervous energy as recruits from dozens of species gathered in the massive training hall. Towering Krathari warriors flexed their forearms, their chitinous armor gleaming under the artificial lights. The serpentine Vorthak coiled and uncoiled their powerful tails, yellow eyes scanning the competition with predatory interest. Even the diminutive but deadly Zephyrians clicked their mandibles in anticipation, their compound eyes processing threats at lightning speed. Among this intimidating crowd stood Sophia Chen, barely 5 feet tall and weighing maybe 120 pounds soaking wet. Her standard-issue training uniform hung loose on her slight frame, and her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. To the alien recruits, she looked like a child who had wandered into the wrong room. "Look at that tiny human," rumbled Kazrath, a Krathari whose lowest whisper could shatter glass. His translator unit converted his words into dozens of languages simultaneously. "She must be lost. This is advanced combat training, not a daycare facility." A chorus of alien laughter erupted around the hall. The Vorthak hissed their amusement, their forked tongues flicking out to taste the air. Several Zephyrians chittered in their musical language, which the translators rendered as mocking commentary about human fragility. Sophia said nothing. She had heard it all before during her years at the Academy. Humans were the newest species to join the Galactic Federation, and they were considered the weakest by virtually every metric that mattered in warfare. No natural armor, no enhanced strength, no bioelectric discharge capabilities, no acid spit, no pheromone-based mind control. Just soft pink skin, fragile bones, and what most aliens considered laughably primitive technology. Commander Thexela, a grizzled Vorthak veteran with scars covering half his serpentine body, slithered into the center of the training hall. His cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on the assembled recruits. Behind him, a massive holographic display materialized, showing a detailed topographical map of a mountainous region. "Welcome to Advanced Long-Range Combat Assessment," Thexela announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had survived 1,000 battles. "This exercise will separate the predators from the prey. You will be divided into hunting teams and target teams. The hunters must eliminate designated targets across various terrains and distances. The targets must survive for 72 hours. The display zoomed in on specific locations marked with glowing red dots. Even through the hologram, the distances looked impossibly vast. Mountain peaks stretched toward alien skies, deep valleys carved between them like scars in the earth. Weather patterns swirled across the simulation, showing wind speeds and atmospheric conditions that would challenge even the most advanced targeting systems. "Maximum engagement range for this exercise is 3,000 meters, Thexela continued. "At that distance, even our most skilled Krathari marksmen struggle to maintain accuracy. Environmental factors, target movement, and equipment limitations make successful shots extremely difficult." Kazrath's mandibles clicked with confidence. 3,000 meters is nothing for Krathari precision. Our neural targeting implants can calculate trajectory, wind resistance, and target prediction automatically." Several other aliens murmured agreement. The Vorthak possessed natural heat-sensing abilities that could track targets through most concealment. The Zephyrians had compound eyes that could spot movement across vast distances. Each species brought evolutionary advantages that humans simply could not match. "Team assignments are as follows," Thexela announced. The holographic display shifted to show unit compositions. Kazrath will lead Alpha Team, consisting of 4 Krathari marksmen. Sistara will command Beta Team with 6 Vorthak infiltrators. Sixth leads Gamma Team with 8 Zephyrian scouts. The alien teams looked formidable on paper. Alpha Team's Krithari possessed cybernetic enhancements that turned them into living weapons platforms. Beta Team's Vorthak could move silently through almost any terrain, while maintaining perfect stealth. Gamma Team's Zephyrians could process visual information faster than most species could even register threats. Delta Team, Thexla announced, his cybernetic eye focusing directly on Sophia, consists of one human sniper, Sophia Chen. The silence that followed was deafening. Then the laughter began again, louder this time. Kazrath's booming voice echoed through the hall. One human? Against 3 full teams of specialists? Commander, surely this is some kind of joke. Perhaps it is mercy, hissed Sistara, her forked tongue tasting the air near Sophia. End her suffering quickly rather than watching her stumble around the mountains for 3 days. Zikth's compound eyes focused on Sophia with mechanical precision. Human reflexes are too slow. Human vision is too limited. Human technology is too primitive. This is not a fair contest. Through all the mockery, Sophia remained silent. She studied the holographic terrain with intense focus, her brown eyes tracing elevation lines and wind patterns. While the aliens boasted about their natural advantages, she was already calculating angles, identifying potential hide sites, and planning movement routes. Commander Thexla raised one scaled hand for silence. The exercise parameters are final. Each team will be inserted at random locations within the training zone. Standard equipment loads apply, plus 1 specialized weapon system per team. No orbital support, no real-time intelligence feeds, no external assistance. What specialized weapon does the human get? Kazrath asked with obvious amusement. A sharp stick? Thexla's scarred features twisted into what might have been a smile.
Sophia Chen has requested an ancient human weapon system.
Something called an MRAD. The aliens looked confused. Their databases contained extensive information about human military technology, but most of it was dismissed as primitive compared to Galactic Federation standards. Plasma rifles, particle beam weapons, and molecular disruptors were the norm in modern warfare. What could humans possibly offer that would make a difference? An MRAD, Sophia spoke for the first time, her voice quiet but clear, is a manually operated chemically propelled projectile weapon. It fires solid metal bullets using explosive powder charges. No energy signature, no electromagnetic emissions, no heat bloom that shows up on sensors. The aliens exchanged glances. Chemical propulsion sounded like something from their species' prehistoric eras. Solid projectiles instead of energy beams seemed laughably backward. The acronym stands for Multi-Role Adaptive Design, Sophia continued. Effective range depends on ammunition selection, environmental conditions, and operator skill. In ideal circumstances, with proper preparation, maximum effective range can exceed 5,000 meters. Now the laughter stopped. Even the most advanced Galactic Federation weapons struggled to maintain accuracy beyond 4,000 meters. The idea that a primitive chemical weapon could outrange their technology seemed impossible. Boasting will not save you, little human, Kazrath rumbled. When the exercise begins, you will learn why humans are considered the weakest species in the galaxy. Sophia met his 4 eyes with her too. For just a moment, something flickered in her gaze. Something that made even the massive Krithari warrior take a half step backward. We'll see, she said simply.